everybody, it's Dave here, Darren over there. We're your two old bloggers that talking publicly, commenting publicly on the Minnesota Vikings since the late 90s. Oh, boys, it's been a long time, but we're here to talk some more and are so happy that everybody could join us, from Anthony to Peter. Raymond's here. I know we're a little bit early. There's reason for it. Darren will explain after the roll-in. But on today's show, we're going to be talking a few things. They are, first off, we're going to start with a different style look at who's going to make the final 53. I know you've seen it everywhere. People and organizations putting out, this is what we forecast as the final 53. Well, that's great. That's grand. We're going to go at it from a different direction. Then we're going to get into this week in Vikingsland, the news and tidbits that have all hit your feeds one way or another. Talk about those. And then we're going to go back into the Vikings Vault, where we're going to look back through history and see if we can glean anything as it compares to this season. All next on Two Old Bloggers. Let's rock! Vikings First and SKOL presents This Week in Vikingsland with Darren and Dave, your two old bloggers. And we're here. How's everybody out there? Hopefully you're not roasting too much today. Raymond says it's 87 there. It feels cool, doesn't it, Raymond? Stay hydrated. Hey, Northfield. All right. Tell the folks why we're early today.
Because it's summer, Dave. I got a softball tournament going on later this afternoon, and so I had to adjust, and we had to go on a little bit earlier to accommodate the games. And that's sort of a thing that happens every summer with me. Sorry, folks, because I either got a tennis tournament going on, or a softball tournament, or basketball, and then there's vacations. So sometimes just got to slightly adjust the start time of Two Old Bloggers on Sunday. Sometimes we even got to go on Saturday because Sundays I could be traveling or whatever. So that's just it. Sorry for the inconvenience. It will probably happen a few more times this summer, but we'll try to keep you up to date as best we can on those time changes.
Hey, it's not that bad. You're trying to stay athletic. My body is giving out on that a while ago, so it's not going to happen. But I wish you luck.
Hey, hopefully we won't need any.
Okay. Now, let's get into the show. Let's start with Theme 1. And with Theme 1, we're getting into camp battles.
Or lack thereof, I guess, Dave. You were leading into it a bit early on, leading into it at the beginning of the show intro. And about this week, we're about to hit like a 4-week dead period of NFL news. Basically, no OTAs going on until training camps start for all teams. And so that has started to get people who write about the Vikings, whether it's people with the newspapers or the bloggers who do it regularly, they're started to come out with their who's going to make the 53-man roster. And Tyler Fornes did it earlier this week on the Real Forno show. I've seen at least 3 bloggers, writers that I read on a regular basis for the Vikings do the same thing. And so wanted to talk about that roster, but I'm not going to go into my projections on who's going to make the 53 because I think that's kind of old ground that's been trodden over this past week. But looking at those projections by Tyler and others, plus thinking about it myself, and Dave, you and I talk about this on a regular basis too, is
just about every day.
Yeah, just about every day. And what struck me about those projections, just thinking about the roster, is this roster, the Vikings roster, seems a lot more set than it has even in recent history. And it feels to me like that the 90 man roster, the guys that are on the 90 man roster right now, a lot of those guys, particularly the undrafted rookie free agents, maybe even some of the later draft picks, a lot of the newbies that weren't Vikings last year, they aren't going to be the best they can hope for is looking to make the practice squad of this team, and or possibly also they got to hope that they play well enough in training camp and in preseason so that other teams see them. So when the Vikings inevitably cut them, they can land on another team's practice roster or 53-man roster. That's just how set it is. When you look at starting positions, Dave, pretty much all of them seem sewn up at this point. You could make an argument that left guard, there might be a battle there, but I think the expectation is amongst almost everybody is that Donovan Jackson is going to be the starter. He is already the starter, but he'd have to really, really
screw up
to have Blake Brandel beat him out. And it would be a huge disappointment for the Vikings internally and us fans if that actually occurred. So other than left guard, which I don't think is actually an open competition right now, I think Donovan Jackson is the starter. Really, the only starting position I see that's really a battle right now would be like the nickel corner, the third corner, the player who would be in the Shaq Griffin role this year for the Vikings. And that's either between, it seems right now that Isaiah Rodgers is going to be the guy starting opposite Byron Murphy Jr. on the corners. And then the question is it going to be Jeff Okudah or Mekhi Blackmon being your nickel guy coming in when the Vikings use three cornerbacks, which is a lot of the time in their defense. Other than that, Dave, all the starting positions are locked up as far as I can tell. And even the depth positions, the backups, not a lot of openings there, a handful of spots. Okay. And some of those would be, okay, who is going to be I think there might be some shuffling potentially, like amongst who would be your number 8 or number 9 offensive lineman, or maybe your number 9 and number 10 if they keep 10. So maybe Walter Rouse could be on the bubble, depending on how things go. At inside linebacker, the main question there is it going to be Brian Asamoah II? Is he going to keep his roster spot, or is Kobe King, the 6th round draft pick, going to take it from him? At cornerback, sort of the same thing, I think, is who's going to be 5th, 6th cornerback? Is Dwight McGlothern going to stick with the team, or is some newcomer like Zemiah Vaughn going to get a roster position ahead of McGlothern? Wide receiver, again, who's going to be your number 5 guy? Is Rondale Moore going to stick with the team, or is it going to be somebody else that emerges, like a Silas Bolden, who makes the team because he's because of his punt return and special teams abilities? And those are really the areas. And edge rusher would be the last one. Again, the top 3 are set: Dallas Turner, Andrew Van Ginkel, and Jonathan Grenard. But so really the only openings there would be, is it going to be Gabe Murphy and Bo Richter again, who are your 4 and 5 edge rushers, or is a guy like Tyler Batty, the undrafted rookie free agent who the Vikings gave a sizable guaranteed amount of money to, is he going to slip in there and take one of those spots? That's about it, Dave, as far as I think roster, positional battles, and most of that is on the depth. And we see so much change in NFL rosters from year to year, Dave. The Vikings did it too this season, particularly along the interior defensive line, in the secondary, on the interior offensive line. But the changes they made there have strengthened the Vikings roster, and a lot of those guys they brought in are going to be starters. So again, not a whole lot of opportunities for new guys, players who weren't Vikings in 2024, who are now Vikings in 2025, I think, to make the roster. And I consider that a good thing, Dave, because I like the roster continuity. I think that the additions that they made adding on to what they already have has made this team stronger than it was in 2025. So, I'd hate to say that the lack of positional battles is going to make training camp boring, because there's going to be a lot of stuff for us to sink our teeth into, particularly the JJ McCarthy daily update on how he's doing, how he's not doing, plus a lot of the other stuff on rookies and who's flashing and who isn't. But I think the excitement is not going to come from who the positional battles are going to be. That's not where your excitement in training camp is going to come from. And again, I think this is good because for Kevin O'Connell, he doesn't have to worry, and the coaching staff doesn't have to worry about, okay, who's starting here and who's starting there, along with installing your offensive and defensive and special team systems. The starters are locked in. They know what they've got. Now they can work on the install and maximizing the talents of the starters that they know are in place. And I think that's a real good place for the Vikings roster to be in. And that is where they are in right now.
Mm-hmm. And you skipped one group, and that's tight ends. Now,
True.
We know who tight end 1 and tight end 2 are.
Mm-hmm.
Hawkinson and Oliver. That's cemented. But does Ben Urasek take over for Bartholomew, who was drafted, but Urasek gets more guaranteed money on his, and then you have Nesbitt as well. Now, Urasek's been doing well because Bartholomew's been out. And, they say the best ability is availability. Mm-hmm. And it's going to hurt Bartholomew. But that's a backup position. Who's going to be tight end 3? Do they keep 4? I would say there's at least 4 on the roster. 1 may be practice squad, but at least 3 active. But we'll see how they set up the team. And that plays into this as well. How many linemen are we keeping? 8, 9, 10 on the offensive side? How many are we keeping on the defensive side? Does LDR have a chance, or does he have a chance to get bumped? It's mm-hmm. getting to that bottom third of the roster when you have position coaches fighting for, no, I want this guy. And another position coach going, no, I want this guy. And one of them's got to go. And they're making that decision. And that will be fun to watch, to see who's that. And if there's any surprises come out of camp. Like, oh, my God, this dude looks great. It could be Batty as an edge rusher. Yeah. He could be like, oh, Gabe Murphy, take your short arms and go, sort of type deal. And it's going to be very interesting. But what we attempted to do with this is not look at who's making the roster, but where the holes are and where the battles will be. And it's all at the bottom end. Now, you said there's possibly 2 starting positions up for grabs. I can see maybe 1.
Yeah. Realistically.
Donovan Jackson has that sewn up. He got stuck in there, and he's staying in there. He's not going to move off. Brandell isn't moving over. It's not going to happen. I can't see that happening at all. So he's got his. He would have to really screw up to lose it. But the other one is that third cornerback. Who's that going to be? Now, you called him a nickel. I think the way Flores plays, that's a bad term. I'd rather go CB3, because generally if they go into a nickel formation, that means Murphy moves to the nickel. And the other guy steps in as an outside cornerback. And could it be Blackman? Yes. Could it be Okudah? Yes. Could Okudah back up at safety? Question mark, because we've only got 4 on the roster right now. Mm-hmm. It is fun to see. It's going to be fun for fans to figure all this out and how it plays out and see how it goes.
Yeah, and there will, despite me saying that well, that the roster battles, there aren't going to be that many, and most of them are at the bottom. Last year, even so, there were a couple of surprises that the Vikings cut that we thought were going to stay. Like Kenny Nwangwu was one of the guys that we thought probably based on preseason and his kickoff returning abilities was going to stick, and they ended up cutting him. But I think they're going to be very minor surprises to us. Jaron Hall was another one. We were kind of like, how come they cut him and brought in Rippon? But I think, as we said at the time, I remember saying at the time, we're probably not going to really remember or be too fussed that Hall got cut. And that's exactly what happened, the way the season turned out, with Darnold playing the way he did, and the Vikings not really needing a backup quarterback, and certainly not needing a number 3 quarterback. And Hall hasn't made a dent in Seattle either.
Yep, I agree. So that's it. We're looking at the stuff on the bottom, and from there we go to theme 2. Here we go. This week in Vikingsland. I'm trying to hit the mute button because the dog's going nuts upstairs. I'm sure.
Oh, Merlin.
It's Merlin and his sister Athena.
Okay.
Daughter number 2 is here visiting.
Okay. Well, can't hear them too much, so hopefully others can't. But we move on to This Week in Vikingsland. Going to hit a few topics here of interest in the news. First one's going to be which I'm sure everybody has seen, but the Vikings released their training camp schedule this week, which is always, a fairly significant deal for fans. Those who are living close in Minnesota would get to, try to figure out if they're going to attend some of these practices. We know that the rookies are going to report July 20th. The vets report July 22nd. And you got the schedule up there. You got 12 open practices. First one's July 26th. First padded practice is July 28th. You got the annual night practice on August the 4th. Joint practices with the Patriots in there as well. And so we are, as I said, we got a 4 weeks of dead period, but we're not very far away, Dave, from things where we're getting to that point where the news cycle will heat up once again for the Vikings and every other NFL team. And we'll start getting pretty much daily information based on reports coming out of these practices to help us answer some of those burning questions that we all have about the Vikings and how they're going to look in 2026. Like, is J.J. McCarthy the franchise guy? It was Will Fries and Ryan Kelly worth the money? Was Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave worth the money? And those sorts of things as well. And so there's lots of other burning questions too. I'm kind of drawing a bit of a blank here on it, but we are again. There another one. Donovan Jackson, is he going to be able? Is he up to the task as a rookie to take over the starting spot at left guard and give us competent, dare I say, even above competent play at that position? These are questions and more are going to be going to start to get information. I wouldn't say answers, but information to see where the answers of those are going to end up. And it's a great time of the year, and we are not very far away from it, Dave. I think less than 4 weeks, basically. So get ready. You're going to have a little bit, enjoy your break now, because in 4 weeks' time, it's going to be all Vikings all the time, pretty much.
And I believe the dates in gray here are the ones open to the public. They're going to be there, starting July 20th. And I think the majority of them are open to the press. Mm-hmm. So there might be days that we're eagerly watching X to see whether it be Alec Lewis or whoever your favorite beat reporter is that has credentials, Judd Zolgad, is saying happening that day. And then we'll all eagerly await Vikings Entertainment to put out the clips, because we're going to be tracking, how's JJ doing? How's JJ to JJ? How's JJ to Jordan Addison? How's JJ to TJ? It's all going to be focused on for most fans how McCarthy looks. And they'll get upset that, oh my God, he got intercepted. Well, was he intercepted because he threw a bad throw, or did the defense stab up, cause problems? Because we want a good defense too.
Yes,
and not everything is the quarterback's fault on such things. Sometimes defense just had a really good play. And when we evaluate the lines, when they finally get their pads on and start hitting plays, it's going to be fun to watch. So I think it's cool. And like I said, it's 4 weeks away. That's it. And we're ready. We're into it. And it can't come quick enough. And bring the fall temperatures with it, please.
Yeah, and like you said, Dave, with along like the padded practices and that through the OTAs and mandatory minicamp, it's all been on air. Kevin O'Connell talking about last week's OTA or minicamp was basically a passing camp. So we haven't learned anything about the trenches. And that's what a big focus of the Vikings, what they addressed in free agency and in the draft in the offseason was the trenches on the offensive line and the defensive line. And we haven't, because of the nature of the practices and the way they were run, we haven't been able to glean anything on how that's looking. In training camp and in preseason, we are going to start getting some intel, some information, some data on that sort of thing, on those very important parts of the team.
And we'll see how the injured are coming back. Darisaw, Fries, Rondale Moore, etc., are faring as well. And that'll be good to see. So that brings us to our next topic. Remember
not
this?
Our favorite one. Yeah, well, back on Jordan Addison. Back on ever since Addison was arrested on suspicion of DUI, July the 12th, I believe, 2024. This whole thing about has been lingering with him and the team and Vikings fans as to what's going to be the outcome of that arrest, and if he's found guilty, is the NFL more than likely going to bring the hammer down and suspend him, likely for 3 games. And so that's something that, again, has been hanging over us. We've been looking for resolution on that. And this week we got word that a trial date for this has been set for July 15th. Now, we'll have to wait and see, Dave, like you pointed out when we were talking about it. We'll see if it actually happens on July 15th or whether it gets somehow delayed for some reason. You never know with legal stuff, scheduling, availability of jury, or however the legal process can grind on for a long, long time. No guarantee that that date is going to happen on July 15th. But at least for me, I do hope that it does happen on the 15th and that there's some quick resolution to this. Either Addison is found not guilty, hopefully, or if it is guilty, and then the NFL comes down with a speedy decision on what type of disciplinary action they're going to give him if he is found guilty. Because I don't like this uncertainty with Addison. I feel it'd be really good for the Vikings, for Kevin O'Connell and the team to find out before training camp starts, hopefully, whether they're going to have Addison services for the entire 17-game season, or if they're going to be without Addison services for the first 3 games of that 17-game season, because I'm sure that will help with their planning. That will help with their development and how they're going to run training camp for the wideouts for the offense. I'm sure that they've got a plan in place, but you can't really implement it when you don't know if Addison is going to be available at the beginning of the season or not. And if he isn't, I'd prefer to know that now. I'm sure the Vikings would too, as regrettable as it would be, because then they can work in training camp on making sure getting Ty Felton or Rondale Moore or Tim Jones or whoever, getting them the proper reps and work during training camp and preseason so they can be ready for their expanded role when the season starts. And also it gets Jalen Naylor ready to be slide in to be the number 2 guy opposite Justin Jefferson when the season starts. And you just can't do that, I think, if you don't know if Addison's going to be available or not. So I'm hoping for whatever the case may be, that we hear the trial gets held when it's held, there's an outcome of that very quickly, and the NFL bases whatever it's going to do very quickly as well. So again, the Vikings can get resolution on Addison's availability for the beginning of the season.
Yeah, and you don't want it, hey, we're delaying it. It's now going to be December 15th.
Yes.
And it's December 15th. They go in, find him guilty, and NFL comes down, bang, suspended. Next 3 games, all in January. No.
Yeah. That would be that's the worst case scenario out of this. Yeah. So it's going to be a big blow to the Vikings if Addison is suspended for 3 games and he's not available at some point in time. They did have to deal with it last year at the beginning of the season too, though, when Addison, he had that ankle injury about, I think, mid-second quarter against the Giants in the season opener. Yep. He missed the entire second half, and then the next 2 games, and the Vikings got by. And so they've got experience doing this, but again, rather them find out now than much later.
Yeah, you rather plan for it than have it come up at a detrimental time in the season. Mm-hmm. But hopefully he'll get his proverbial stuff together all in one sock and make better decisions from here on out.
Yes, and he's got Justin Jefferson, who talked this week about bringing Addison under his wing more than he has in the past and trying to help him with that off the field stuff. And Jefferson, I think, would be a really good example because he's kept his nose clean the entire time he's been in the NFL, and Addison needs to do the same.
Mm-hmm. Little Iggy, I have no idea. Be nice to him. That's an easy way to start. All right, next bit. Ben Gessling was talking about something.
He was. He came out this week and said that the Vikings have signed offensive coordinator Wes Phillips to a 1-year extension. Phillips's contract was set to expire at the end of the 2025 season. It's now going to, with the extension, expire at the end of the 2026 season. And normally, normally an offensive coordinator for a team that was 14-3 last year and was 9th in points scored in the NFL last year, normally if the offensive coordinator had been signed to an extension, even a 1-year deal, that would be, pretty high profile news for the fans of that team. This hasn't been. And I think the big reason is because Wes Phillips doesn't call the plays for the Vikings. Kevin O'Connell does. And so we always say this is Kevin O'Connell's offense. Like, he's the guy, really the mastermind behind it, even though Wes Phillips is a trusted lieutenant to Kevin O'Connell and has been with the team since O'Connell became head coach in 2022. But you could make, I think that the feeling is here is that if Wes Phillips disappeared tomorrow and went to another team, the Vikings offense wouldn't really be significantly impacted by that. We could have a debate about that, but I think that that's one of the feelings about Wes Phillips. I bring this up though but
we just don't know, to tell the truth. We don't know what he does behind the scenes. We speculate because he may put the whole play game plan together, and then KOC looks at the sheet and literally goes, "All right, run XYZ."
Yeah.
But we don't know, but it's a good thing that he was at least recognized with the extension, I believe.
Yes, I think continuity is good on the coaching staff. When you look at how the Vikings have performed in the 3 years under Kevin O'Connell, I think that this is not to suggest that Wes Phillips is sitting every day with his feet up on his desk and not doing anything. I'm sure he's a very, very, very busy man and works really hard. But, coaching being coaching, sometimes even if you're working hard, you're not as effective as a Sean McVay is, because Sean McVay is brilliant and one of the best at what he does. There's just some people who are way better at their profession than others. But again, doesn't mean Wes Phillips isn't a hard worker and making valuable contributions to the Vikings. Just that, again, I think that the perception is that Kevin O'Connell is the guy, the puppet master of the Vikings offense. And the main reason why they've had success with their quarterbacks and with the offense when they have had success. Anyway, but I bring this up because Phillips got an extension, but our other coordinator, our defensive coordinator, Brian Flores, did not get an extension yet. His contract is set to expire at the end of the 2025 season, and it makes you wonder, why is that the case? Now, it could be that the Vikings are working on it, and it just hasn't come through yet. Could be that Flores says, hey, boys, I like it in Minnesota, but maybe hold off on that. I'm not interested in signing an extension until I find out at the end of the 2025 season whether I have gotten a head coaching job somewhere. And we know Flores interviewed for coaching positions during this offseason. He's made it clear last year that he wants to be a head coach at some, in the future in the NFL, and sooner rather than later. So maybe that's the reason why he hasn't gotten the extension and Phillips has. When we've talked about Flores, Dave, in the past, about him, and we talk about him a lot here, there's been comments from folks here that have said, hey man, just make him the highest paid coordinator in the NFL and entice him to stay in Minnesota by giving him a boatload of money. Not as much as Kevin O'Connell would get, but again, really high paying. Give him head coaching money as a coordinator. I don't think that would keep Brian Flores in Minnesota if he got a head coaching offer because he wants to be a head coach. But I do think that the Vikings, if they haven't, they should be trying, if they can, to get Flores extended because he's earned it. And maybe he would be amenable to a bigger pay bump for another year or two. And if he got a head coaching job, he can always get out of that contract and we don't have to pay him and he can go elsewhere. But just interesting, something to monitor. Maybe there'll be some movement on this during training camp too, where Flores does get extended a year or more at a higher pay rate than what he has right now, because we want him in Minnesota as long as he wants to be here.
Absolutely. And as I discussed with Tyler, it could just be a negotiating deal. Mm-hmm. The contracts usually play out to the last minute. That's the way it works with the Vikings staff. And it's just, hey, KOC got Coach of the Year in this massive contract. I contributed greatly towards that, including probably winning some games last season on the defensive side. I want even more money. So than KOC, but even a lot more than he's making now. And he's supposedly getting paid handsomely. As a coordinator, he may be going, I want to be the highest paid defensive coordinator in the league. And so they're trying to match that and come to an agreement. And we'll see if they do.
Yes, we sure do. Final topic here is, the Vikings with the Wilfs, they've really put an emphasis on, I think, and done a great job in the past decade or so, basically since they've been owners, and I think accelerated that in recent years, particularly with the US Bank Stadium open up. I think they've really made a real effort to bring in the legendary players from the past with the Vikings and have them feel that they're part of the current team and be involved with the stadium and have them take them in and have them involved in events so they can, educate younger fans on the big, rich history that the franchise have, and also just build their brand as well, and just highlight all the great players that the Vikings have had over the years. But what happens when one of those legendary players off the field stuff seems to keep cropping up and is embarrassing your brand and your franchise? Do you cut them off at some point in time from being part of team events and celebrating them? And I bring this up because of the guy that you're showing photos of this week. I think we all saw the story about the TMZ video of Adrian Peterson getting in a fist fight at a poker tournament. I think it was in Houston, his hometown. And it got me thinking, it just seems like this has happened a lot with Adrian Peterson over the years. And got me thinking about how many now this wasn't, he hasn't been arrested for this. It was just more an embarrassing bad look for Peterson. Alcohol was involved, according to Peterson, but it got me thinking about how many run-ins with the law has he had over the past few years. And a quick AI search found that he's been arrested 4 times. First time was resisting arrest at a Houston nightclub in 2012. He had the 2014. He was found beating his 4-year-old son with the switch. He ended up going on administrative leave, I think, with the NFL. Missed that whole year pretty much. He had a domestic charge with his wife at the airport, I think in Los Angeles, as he was boarding a plane. And then just this April, DUI after he'd been attending a Vikings draft party. And those are just the arrests. He also has debts of around $12 million, apparently. And he's had fathered all those kids out of wedlock, which isn't a crime, but is frowned upon by some people. Also costs them a lot in child support. So, the off the field stuff for Peterson has not been very good over the past decade and on. And it just makes me think that maybe the Vikings, and Adrian Peterson was a great guy to watch as a player, like one of the greatest running backs in NFL history, I believe. Certainly a joy to watch on the field. And did a lot for the Vikings and our leading rusher all time, all that stuff. He's going to make the Hall of Fame, I'm sure. You can't ignore that, and the Vikings shouldn't. But when this off the field stuff keeps on piling up, I don't think I'd be holding off including him in my team events as much as possible right now, because the off the field stuff isn't going away. He's making bad choices there. And I don't think I'd want my franchise or brand associated with a guy doing the things that he has done in the past and keeps on doing. And it's sad.
Hey, maybe you can blame it on CTE, but it's because of his running style. But yes, he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Well deserved. He should. He's an outstanding running back in his day. But his off-field stuff has become somewhat of a problem, and we have players throughout our history that have had problems, and then eventually they might get it cleaned up. And hopefully he does. Hopefully somewhere he finds the way and how to behave in public. Now, from what I gather from TMZ, there was a disagreement. I guess he thought the guy was cheating or dealing from the bottom of the deck or something like that. And he confronted him and proceeded to get in a fist fight and lose. It's not the first fight he's lost. It's
yes, yeah.
But you don't need your name in the headlines for bad stuff. And he's been in there quite a few times, as you've pointed out.
And Dave, it's maybe, I don't know if it's reckless to speculate, but you're talking about the CTE things. I've said this before. Every time I see past players and they keep coming up doing these weird stuff that doesn't make any sense, like Antonio Brown's been doing for a number of years now, you start wondering about the traumatic brain injury and if that's impacting their behavior, because I don't remember Adrian Peterson ever leaving a game because of a concussion or being diagnosed with a concussion. Now, he also played at a time before I think the concussion protocol was what it is now, but we know his running style. He invited contact a lot of times. He led with his head on a lot of stuff, and very well, he's taken a lot of knocks in high school, college, and pro on the noggin. And we could find out years later that yes, CTE was a big issue for him, and that might explain some of the erratic behavior he's had over the years, doing things that you wouldn't expect a law-abiding person to do.
Right. I don't know. We'll find out. And yes, Norsefius, I believe he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. His career was that good.
Yeah.
So, yes, he was only, first and second down, couldn't pass pro, all that stuff. But all the records he got, the nearly breaking Peterson's record, he's going to make it.
Yeah, the total rushing yardage he has, the amount of Pro Bowls and first team All Pros he has, the 2,000-yard season, like all of that, I think stacks up where you be very surprised if he wasn't a first ballot Hall of Famer. Yep. And maybe the only reason he wouldn't be is if voters took into account some of this off the field stuff that's happening and held that against him.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Which is possible. Who knows? Yes. It's possible. All right. What comes after theme 2?
Theme 3, Dave.
We're going into the Vikings Vault. And for those that don't know, because it's been a while, the Vault is when we go back and look at certain items or people from Minnesota Vikings vaunted history. Who are we talking about today, Darren?
Today, Dave, this is centered around J.J. McCarthy, as a lot of our themes have been the past 12 months or so. But a lot of talk about J.J. McCarthy and that he is going to be the Vikings starting quarterback on a team with very high expectations in his second year after he didn't play at all last year because of his meniscus injury and him being on the injured reserve. And so uncertainty there, questions about will J.J. McCarthy hold the Vikings back, a team that, again, roster-wise, up top to bottom, looks as strong as the Vikings have had in a long, long time. So I got to thinking about that, and it turns out that, as I thought about it, that this has happened a few times in the past 25 years with the Vikings, and actually 4 times, and with 4 different quarterbacks where they have gone into their second year as pro as the anointed starter for the Vikings. It happened with Teddy Bridgewater in 2015. It happened with Christian Ponder in 2012, Tavares Jackson in 2007, if you remember, and in 2000 with Daunte Culpepper. So I wanted to look at how those players did that second year that they were the starters, and also how the Vikings did in those years, and kind of compare it to those teams to what McCarthy is walking into this year in 2025. Going to start with the most recent example, which is 2015 with Teddy Bridgewater. Just looking at his stats, Dave, that year Teddy Bridgewater started all 16 games. He threw for 3,200 yards, 3,231 to be exact. 14 touchdown passes, 9 interceptions, 65.3% completion percentage, 44 rushes, 192 yards, 3 TD runs. The Vikings went 11-5 that year, and they won the division and then lost in the wildcard game in the bitterly cold game back at TCFF Stadium against the Seahawks, which they should have won, actually. But yes. But, just looking at those stats, Dave, it would be hard to believe that a team in today's NFL in 2025, just 10 years later, could go 11-5 with a quarterback with those kind of passing stats. Yet the Vikings did. But if you look at that team, a few things there. It was a very run-centric offense. It was focused on Adrian Peterson, who we just talked about. He led the NFL in rushing that year. Mike Zimmer with Norv Turner at offensive coordinator. They were pretty clear that they just wanted Teddy to be a game manager, not lose the game. They weren't expecting him to win the game. And he didn't have a whole lot to throw to. You had the husk of Mike Wallace they brought in that last year, who did nothing. Stephon Diggs had a strong rookie year, but still he caught 54 or 55 passes that year. He wasn't like the all-pro guy at that point that he has become. And they were thrown to Charles Johnson as well. Adam Thielen was a year away from breaking out. You had Kyle Rudolph there as the tight end catching. The offensive line was meh. It was either meh to play poor at times. The offensive supporting cast wasn't there. Certainly that what McCarthy has. Defensively now, the Vikings were starting to come on there. They had just drafted Eric Kendricks and Danielle Hunter, and those guys played pretty big roles with that defense. They'd signed Tom Johnson. He was a hell of a player for us that year and future years. Everson Griffin and Linval Joseph were in their primes. So was Harrison Smith. Xavier Rhodes was just getting into his 3-year stretch of being a shutdown corner. They had Captain Munnerlyn. Terrence Newman was there. So that defense was strong.
Was still playing.
D-Rob was still playing and still effective. They were fifth in the league in points given up that year. So a very strong defense. I don't know if they're quite as good as last year's Vikings defense, but it was pretty close. But overall, if you look at that 2015 team, particularly on offense, not as strong as I think the team that J.J. McCarthy is walking into in 2025. I don't think. So
not even close.
And yet they went 11-5 and won the division. Mm-hmm. Let's look at 2012. Christian Ponder. That year in 2012, as a second year, his anointed starter, he threw for 2,935 yards, 18 touchdown passes, 12 interceptions, 62.1% completion percentage. He rushed 60 times for 253 yards, 2 TDs. The Vikings went 10-6 that year. They had a surprise year. They finished second in the division to that team from Wisconsin. They made the playoffs and, of course, lost in the wild card game to the Packers at Lambeau in the game where Joe Webb started because Christian Ponder was injured and could not. Again, looking at those stats, though, hard to believe that this 10-year, in 2025, you'd be hard pressed to believe a team could go 10-6 with a quarterback with those stats, Dave. Yep. And that was a very flawed team. Again, offensively, they were carried by Adrian Peterson having a season for the ages where he ran for over 2,000 yards, almost broke Eric Dickerson's single season rushing record. Ponder, as for all his faults, he was throwing to Jerome Simpson and Michael Jenkins for most of the year. Kyle Rudolph was effective, but no TJ Hawkinson, I think, is in the pass catching.
Rudolph was what, a rookie?
Or it was his second year, too. Second year, too. They did have Percy Harvin, dynamic player, but only for 9 games. Remember, he basically got injured and quit playing for the Vikings after that. The offensive line, again, was pretty meh. And Ponder played some brutal games where you could tell he was not the answer at quarterback for us. And defensively, they were middle of the pack. I think they were 14th in points given up, opportunistic, but they certainly had trouble getting after the quarterback a little at times. Although they had Jaron Allen, that's a future. They didn't have trouble getting after the quarterback. They had Allen, they had Griffin, but defensively they weren't super strong. Again, I think if you look top down overall, offensively and defensively, the team that Ponder played on in 2012 is not nearly as strong, even close to what McCarthy is going to be taking over in 2025. I don't think there's any question about that. And yet they went 10-6 and made the playoffs as a wild card team.
Yep.
Looking at the third example, Tavares Jackson, 2007. Now get a load of these stats, Dave, down the Vikings Vault. Keep it in mind, he was only able to start 12 games because of injuries and various things, but he threw for 1,911 yards. That is not a mistake. That's how many passing yards he passed for. 9 TDs, 12 interceptions, 58.2% completion percentage. He did have 54 rushes for 260 yards, 3 TDs. The Vikings went 8-8 that year, didn't make the playoffs, but they were 8-6 at one point and were in the wild card hunt, and then they lost their last 2 games to Washington and Denver to take them out of the playoff spot. But again, that season, you'd be hard pressed to think that those stats would get you anywhere today close to playoff contention. You figure that's a kind of a quarterback play that would get you the first overall draft pick in the 2026 draft. But and that team did have some things going for him. It was Peterson's rookie season. Him and Chester Taylor formed a very, very dynamic 1-2 running back punch, and the Vikings leaned on that a lot. But to throw to, as bad as Jackson was, again, Bobby Wade was our leading wide receiver. Vasanth Shianko had not quite become the player he was. Troy Williamson was still around, dropping footballs. Robert Ferguson was used regularly. Sidney Rice had been drafted, but he was still a couple of years away from breaking out. So that is not exactly Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson that Jackson was working with. And the offensive line was pretty good. You had Hutch, you had Brian McKinney. I think Matt Burke was still starting there, so the offensive line was pretty strong. Mm-hmm. But overall offensively, particularly on the passing game, not much to go at. And defensively, the defense was emerging again. It had the Williams wall, very strong against the run. We still had Antoine Winfield and some other strong players. Robeson was a rookie, but we did have trouble getting after the quarterback, and the Vikings rectified that next year by trading for Jared Allen. But again, that team not close to being as good top to bottom offensively and defensively as what J.J. McCarthy is stepping into in 2025. I think pretty safe to say. And again, they still went 8-8 and almost were in the wild card hunt.
And Tavares Jackson's record was 8-4.
Yes. Final example. Going back a while, 2000, Daunte Culpepper. His stats now were starting to get somewhere, though. In his second year, threw for 3,937 yards, 33 touchdowns, 16 interceptions, completion percentage of 62.7%. He rushed the ball 89 times, 470 yards, 7 touchdowns. So he was a big running threat as well as a big passing threat. And the Vikings went 11-5 that year. Yeah, 11-5 that year. Yes. 11-5, won their division, won their playoff game against New Orleans, got to the NFC Championship game against the Giants. We know what happened there. But
yeah, Giants cheated. Yes.
Yeah. But if you look at that team, Dave, offensively, I think it stacks up pretty well with what McCarthy is walking into now. The offensive line, even though they moved on from Randall McDaniel, they still had Stussy and David Dixon and Corey Stringer. Matt Burke had taken over at center, so that was a pretty good offensive line. Randy Moss, Chris Carter, dynamic 1-2 punch, just like Jefferson and Addison now. You could probably argue maybe a little bit better because Carter may be more used, but it's a tough call. And you had a very productive veteran running back in Robert Smith that you could hand the ball off to, much like the Vikings will have when they hand off to Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason in 2025. So offensively, really, really strong. And that was the strength of the team. A very good supporting cast for Daunte Culpepper in his first year as a starter. Defensively, though, can't hold a candle to what this 2025 defense should be for the Vikings. They were 24th in points given up. They were starting Robert Tate and Waswa Sarwangwa at cornerback at the end of the year, and they'd started Kenny Wright as well. If you remember those guys, you remember how painful it was to watch them playing cornerback. So defensively, a big sieve. So again, offensively holds up well with the 2025, but defensively way, way less talented than what the 2025 Vikings defense should be. And that defense is going to support J.J. McCarthy quite well as a starter. So bit of a rundown of those things. I think, a couple of things with that to finish this segment off with. If you're worried about McCarthy starting in his second year, one thing to point out about Teddy, Ponder, and even Tavares Jackson, they all started a fair amount of games as rookies, something that J.J. McCarthy did not do. Teddy took over as the Vikings starter after the Vikings benched Matt Castle. So he started 12 games as a rookie, a lot of playing time as a rookie heading into year 2. Christian Ponder started 10 games after the Vikings as a rookie after the Vikings benched Donovan McNabb in 2011.
Burner McNabb.
Yes. And then even Jackson got a couple of late season starts as a rookie in 2006 after the Vikings had seen enough of Brad Johnson as a starter. Only Culpepper was the only one who didn't play at all as a rookie and then became a starter in his second year. Same as J.J. McCarthy. And yet, for those 3 guys who got starting reps and a lot of starts in their rookie seasons, in Ponder and Bridgewater's case, they really struggled as rookies or as second-year starters. It didn't seem to, it helped them, you would think, but it didn't make a big, they didn't light the league up. And so if you're worried about J.J. McCarthy and him not starting a game or 2 or 3 or 4 as a rookie last year, look at those 3 examples and you can see it doesn't always help a quarterback be significantly better than you'd expect him to be. I think the other thing that's and we talked about it also early on in the segment, Dave, is the other thing is, again, looking at the teams. JJ McCarthy is walking into a great situation in 2025, better than any of those four guys did as far as the total roster. This is a very complete Vikings team, it appears to be. I think injuries are the only thing that's going to prevent it from reaching its potential. And so, again, JJ McCarthy is walking into a great situation, as good as you could expect a second-year player to be. That's going to help him tremendously, especially the defense and all the support that he's got offensively. And again, Kevin O'Connell, Wes Phillips, those guys who've been around for 4 years now to support him in his development. So I think those all, if you look at the past, there's some reasons to be enthused about JJ McCarthy's chances to be successful and a very effective quarterback in his second year in the NFL, even though he didn't play a lick last year.
Hey, I agree. He's got the best team out of all those quarterbacks, the best all-round team, top to bottom. He's got the best supporting cast, along with a great offensive-minded coach that's going to help. Now, granted, Culpepper had Tice at the time, who was offensive-minded, but I think it's easy. We're going to talk about 10-plus wins. I called 13. I think you called 12. I think if everybody stays healthy, this team will excel. And who knows? There's logic behind how this team is one of those from Destiny, with the once every 8 years, the whole stuff like that. We play the Ravens, all those things that come into play in our history that point to, are we good or are we not good? Mm-hmm. All that happens this year. So it's going to be fun to watch, to see how far this kid can take the Minnesota Vikings and how far he plays. Does he hit 4,000 yards passing his first year? Unlike a certain nail-painting quarterback in Chicago, who knows?
Yeah.
That's going out for my buddies over at the Frustrated Chicago Sports Fan Channel. They know who they are.
They sure do.
It's going to be fun. I can't wait. I want this month to get over with. Let's get back on the field. Mm-hmm. Let's start putting on pads. Let's start hearing popping of linemen hitting each other. Let's start seeing the ball fly. I can't wait. Hopefully it'll bring down the temperature as well.
It'll be here before we know it, just like every year. So just gotta wait a little bit longer, Dave. A little bit longer.
Peter says the 72 Dolphins have never been this nervous. I don't know about that, Peter. It takes an awful lot to go undefeated in the NFL.
Especially now when you got 17 regular season games.
Plus the playoffs. Hey, ask the Patriots. They almost did it. But the last of the 72 team is unfortunately dying off.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, well, this week we're going to have Tyler on Monday with the Real Forno Show, and he's already told me, Dave, come up with your quarter century team. So I've got to go through and look at who I would select in the last 25 years to throw on that list. I can guarantee you Culpepper's probably going to be the quarterback that goes on there. I'm not putting on JJ McCarthy as much as I'd like to. Now he hasn't thrown a pass yet. So we'll see who else goes on there.
We will. Tune in, folks.
Going besides softball? And are you going to let us know how you did?
I will let you know next week. We get on here. We'll be on regular time next week, 3 p.m. Central, but Northwest with Kenzie Brothers reference down there. Yes. Thanks, Norcius. But yeah, no, just going to go off to the field now after this wraps up and hopefully get a couple of W's and a couple of beers afterwards.
Sounds good. What do we say, buddy?
We say SKOL Vikings, baby.
SKOL Vikings, and thanks for joining us. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell, and rate us on your favorite podcast aggregator. Darren and Dave, thank you for watching this episode of Two Old Bloggers. We look forward to seeing you on every show on the new Vikings First and SKOL. You can find our podcasts as part of the Fans First Sports Network. Sports takes for the fan, from the fan. SKOL, everybody!